these new disclosures, what effect they might have, and on the public and on policy. Actually, I said from my experience, the effect on policy is a very, in actual practice, is a very different question from the effect on the public. Those are two different things. The Pentagon Papers 40 years ago did have quite a big effect on public opinion about the war, although the public was already against the war on the whole, majorities. But it increased those numbers and increased the intensity somewhat. That had no effect on Nixon's policy. The Pentagon Papers themselves did not affect Nixon's policy at all. He wasn't paying any attention to public opinion any more than, let's say, Cheney, when he was asked recently, who was working for Nixon at the time, was learning at his feet, perhaps. When Cheney was asked, pointed out to him that poll numbers were against both wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, his answer was one word: so, so what? And that was Cheney. We all know Cheney. I don't see that big a difference in the Obama administration or any other administration. So when it comes to the public being forcing, let's say, a real change in policy by a change in opinion, which may in turn reflect disclosures, you can't count on that at all. In fact, it's not very likely to happen very much. There is that disconnect.
But are you saying that the Pentagon Papers didn't help end the Vietnam War?
Actually, the Pentagon Papers themselves, this isn't a very familiar point. I make it occasionally, but I don't get right down to it. Yes, in the first instance, I would say the Pentagon Papers themselves had no effect on the war, on actually changing the war. We could go into a whole other question of what did affect it. And a major thing that shortened the war was Nixon's resigning, facing impeachment 9 months before the war ended. And that in turn depended very crucially on the criminal actions that Nixon had taken against an American citizen, me, because of his fear that I would put out information, current information, on his administration, which went beyond the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers ended before he came into office. They ended in 1968. He didn't mind the content of the Pentagon Papers at all. In fact, he wanted them out faster and bigger. What he feared was that I might have documents on his administration of the kind that has just come out through the administrations of WikiLeaks here on the Obama administration as well as the past ones. And the fear that current documents will come out beyond the Pentagon Papers is something that throws any administration into a frenzy. And in my case, coming back, it drove Nixon, I think, not because he was paranoid. I think he did pretty much what other presidents would have done. His reasonable fear that I would reveal information on the nuclear threats he had made and was still making against North Vietnam, and his threats of escalation, drove him to, quite rationally, instrumentally, to trying to get information to blackmail me into silence by going into my former doctor's office and then even going to the point of bringing a dozen Cubans up to incapacitate me totally, a hit squad. That sort of thing, when it was exposed, which was unlikely to be exposed, but when it was exposed by John Dean and others, he then had to bribe people into silence, new obstruction of justice. And when that got exposed, he was faced with impeachment and had to resign. That shortened the war. So I was a link.
So you did get there in the end. You were a link.
I was a link in a chain of events that actually did shorten the war in a way that most Americans don't know, don't appreciate. And I often get credit. People say, here's a man who really shortened the war by the Pentagon Papers. And I don't bother to go into that.
Give them the long version.
Give them the long version, which I just did.
Thank you very much.
Your demand for crisp answers is never very binding on me, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going to lean on you tonight.
The older I get, but with jet lag, I can tell you, you're going to have to.
All right. All right, Julian. Let me ask you then. What's your policy objective in this week's big download?
Well, I'm heartened to see, to hear that Dan says that in order for us to have an effective policy outcome, I needed an attempted assassination. But who knows? The way things are playing, maybe that's
That would help. That would help.
maybe that's on the cards. There certainly has been an aggressive response by the Pentagon and some elements in the U.S. administration into trying to get up an espionage case against me personally and against other people that we work with, to the degree that last week Pentagon spokesperson Lepin stated that the rest of the media, if they published our material, would be at risk of something. He didn't go into what that risk was, but if you read carefully the little droppings that are left in the statement, you see that he is trying to frame a situation where the rest of the press can be prosecuted under the Espionage Act for reporting our material.
But let me go back to my original question. What are you trying to achieve? Because this war is history, or all but history.
Well,
so what's the point?
I would have to and must disagree about this war being history. There are still 50,000 US troops in Iraq. Certainly for Iraqis, this war is not history. There is still a bubbling civil war in that country. The Iraqi government election was 7 months ago. It is still yet to form government. The country is so dysfunctional.
But how did you want this big release of documents to play into that?
Well,
what's the point?
We would say the truth does not need a policy objective.
But was this really a gift to historians that you made this week?
No, not a gift to historians. You know, there is nothing new in this world except the history that we do not know. So history is what I just said now. History is yesterday, history is last week. And all this we use to make the decisions that we need to make. Maliki, in response to this leak, extraordinary, and we made the joke that, well, I'll make the joke after. Maliki came out and said that this leak had been timed to destabilize him and to expose, falsely expose his use of Iraqi special forces to raid his opponents and so on, and that would affect his position in the government. So our joke that we should call this Iraq leak Maliki, because it's such a self-centered description that all this could have just been about him. But you see, it is affecting him, and it is affecting the people in Iraq. And the people in Iraq, in order to understand their own internal relationship and own internal actions now, need the history of the last 6 years in which to operate.
But you could have made it worse, because your documents really, a lot of them relate to a time when the Shia were committing atrocities against the Sunni. So you may have just stirred it up again.
Yeah, you never know what the outcome is, but the truth is always the best place to start, because in the end, without that, we have nothing.
But what about the Afghan? Okay, let's talk about truth and how much truth, because there's a lot of disquiet about the fact that the Afghan download wasn't adequately redacted, is the term.
There has been
Why were those names not taken out?
There has been a lot of propaganda about that, and I can go into that in detail, but perhaps we save that question for later on.
I'm sure it's going to come up again.
Yeah. You know, I see, other than these 109,000 people that we have documented as being killed in Iraq and the circumstances behind their killing, the big outcome for the rest of the world is to understand that the Pentagon lies, and it lies frequently, and on any particular issue is in fact no more credible than sometimes simply witnesses in the street talking to Reuters. You know, that in fact was one of that was one of the complaints given to to Nixon, and Daniel will remember the name of the person who did it. The big problem with the Pentagon Papers was that it would alter the relationship between the people and the president, and show the people that the president's word, in fact, could not be trusted. And we are in a situation where military organizations, like the Pentagon's word, cannot be trusted. And if we see that their official voice is no more accurate than the voice of random people in the streets of Baghdad speaking to Reuters, then we will see all future attempts at war in a different manner, and that will have policy outcomes.
Before I turn questions, before I allow our audience to ask questions, let me go back to the Afghan thing again. You essentially, if I understood correctly, you're saying that the important names, the names of people who would have been put in danger, were taken out.
We took away 1 in 5 of those documents. That's 15,000 of the total of 90,000 documents. NATO in Kabul last week told CNN that they had not found a single person, a single Afghan who was in need of protection or moving. The Pentagon has stated that, as far as it is aware, last week, that not a single person has been killed or harmed.
So evidently you do believe the Pentagon on occasion?
No, but we can see the innate interest in pushing a line one way or the other, and their innate interest is not in pushing the line that we have caused no harm. So I believe that statement.
All right. Well, let's begin with questions from our audience.
Yes, I guess it's too late here, but there's no chance of a microphone possibly.
For them?
No, for me.
You've got one on your time.
Oh, okay. I thought that was just for taping. You
No,
can you hear all right in back then? Okay, fine. I thought that was just
Okay.
I was afraid of losing my voice. So
Right. And if you'd like me to repeat
So I
anything,
don't need
I'm
to
happy
shout
do
as
that.
much as I was there. Sounds right. Okay, good.
All right. So who'd like to go first? All right, lady in the corner over there. And I appreciate you both. I know Julian's not feeling very well. He's coming down with a cold, and you are jet lagged, as you say. So thank you very much for your patience and forbearance. Yes?
Hi, this is Jane Bryant from the One Click Internet News Service.
Can you hold up your arm somewhere?
Yeah, so maybe why don't you stand up?
Julian, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on the work from WikiLeaks. I think it's absolutely great. What I'm disappointed in is this element of shooting the messenger, especially the New York Times recently. You gave information to the New York Times. Did you know that they were going to sideswipe you in that way?
No, but that sort of tabloid activity, which that article, by the way, is has errors in it from top to bottom and is a real smear hit piece. But that is something that is not that unusual for the New York Times. Now, when we did the Afghan leak, the young soldier who was accused of being our source, Bradley Manning, now who spent 6 weeks in prison in Kuwait and has been transferred to Quantico in the United States awaiting trial, accused of being our source and therefore also accused of being the source to the New York Times for their Afghan articles. They produced a profile on him which depicts him as essentially as a dysfunctional short faggot.
Yeah, disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting. Removed all higher level political motivations from him and psychoanalyzed him down to problems in his childhood and a demand for attention. One of the most disgusting articles I've seen in a long time. So no surprise to see this happening about me. The interesting question is that as a result of sort of journalists with extremely bad character working for the New York Times, or is it the real politic that Bill Keller has to go through in order to get out any story that depicts the US military in a negative way?
The balance, as he might see it.
That's right, the so-called balance. I hate that. We do not use that word, we use accurate. But balance, as in balance this power group with that power group, and maybe the New York Times will survive. And so if that interpretation is true, that shows you something extremely significant about the forces at work in US society.
Okay, and last question, please. What next for WikiLeaks? What's your next big leak, as it were?
Well, we never say when or precisely what.
I'm asking, well-ish.
Yeah, but we do have these 15,000 extra documents from Afghanistan, and they will be released sometime soon, as soon as additional media have had a chance to go through them.
Thank you. Gentleman at the back in the blue shirt.
Hi, I'm Asim Khan from School of Oriental and African Studies, a media student there. My question is to Mr. Assange. There is a lot of discomfort that the states across the world, different governments have with your functioning. So clearly, because you're holding them accountable. But what are your relationships with other civil society organizations? And are you looking forward to forge some sort of a network that can hold you back if you were to fall against all these mighty states? Is there a strategy in place? Thank you.
We have extraordinary support that cuts across nearly every institution in Western society, and some in Africa and some in South America. That support, although numerically very large, and it includes people within the Pentagon, it includes people within intelligence agencies, is not organized. That is the biggest deficit and problem we have is not the level of support, but rather the lack of the organization of that support. For the civil society groups, I mean, there's some here in London who have been supporting us. As time has gone by, there's a sort of self-organization that is happening with people who share common values with us and want to see us looked after and protected. And one of the reasons that I am here in the UK as opposed to somewhere else is that support from lawyers and some other groups here in the United Kingdom. But we can use a lot more, and we can also use those people who do support us finding each other and producing some kind of friends of WikiLeaks and supporting us in their own way, because we're completely engaged in sort of our core publishing efforts and our core defense, and that leads no management time left over to organize the very genuine support that we have in many institutions.
Yes, lady in the front row. Before you go, I just want to ask a follow-up question to that. You're pretty excoriating in your criticism of the New York Times, and I'm sure that you're frustrated with a lot of the things that are written about you, but ultimately you are pretty much dependent on the mainstream media, not only for garnering support, but also for having this vast amount of information that you're releasing parsed and put into context. Do you like the press or do you hate it?
This is a little bit like the question about whether you've stopped beating your wife. There are fine journalists still in mainstream journalism. I suspect the numbers are going down. And there is what everyone knows to be the jackal press, and that is opportunists who look to curry favor or just get a story out by destroying people. And
do you feel that's happening to you?
Our organization is no exception. What is interesting about that is there is a strong market demand for information about us. That's not surprising. That market demand is much greater than we can fulfill, or anyone who actually knows anything can fulfill. And the people who know the most, of course, are in a position where they have to keep quiet because they need to protect sources or key aspects of our organization which if spoken about, and lead to very destructive attacks. So into that vacuum steps people who simply make stuff up. And so I was thinking about this. If you have a choice to make stuff up about the Pentagon, or you have a choice to make stuff up about WikiLeaks, what do? There's sort of a market demand for both. Which one do you go for? Well, if you make stuff up about a titanic organization, not just the Pentagon, but giant Swiss banks as an example, which we've been sued by before. If you make stuff up about those organizations, well, then you have to deal with them. You have to deal with those titanic abusive organizations trying to attack you as a result of your work. If you make stuff up about activist organizations, if you make stuff up about dissidents and lone heroes, and certainly that happened in Daniel Ellsberg's case, who's going to attack you? WikiLeaks is going to attack you. WikiLeaks is busy dealing with tremendous attacks of its own. So it's very easy. You get on the side of the big powerful organization. You don't need to fact check when you're writing about less powerful organizations, because hey, what's the Free Press Vanguard going to do? Sue you for libel?
Go ahead. Question.
My name is Alexandra, and I guess the question is to both of you. I saw a very interesting BBC documentary the other day about the origins of the internet and the way that it was founded in order to effectively create a virtual community that's free, without hierarchies, and really spread information and, I guess, the perpetuation of the information to the masses, where there aren't the kind of, where information isn't handed down from those who know, but it's actually built up from the people. And in terms of the leaks, I guess, that come, I'm wondering, particularly as to your comment, Julian, regarding you're not concerned about balance, you're concerned about accuracy, and perhaps insofar as it extends to your experience as well. Is it not a consideration that truth must come in context? Because the truth is such a broad term, and it almost seems that the interest in perhaps in WikiLeaks and leaks of other sorts is that they challenge what, say, an institution says, but nonetheless everything should be taken in context, if that makes sense.
Well, they're incomplete. I think you would admit there are many millions more documents that you haven't published. Let's ask you, Mr. Ellsberg, is the truth as distorted by WikiLeaks as if there hadn't been WikiLeaks? In other words, an incomplete bunch of documents in the public domain can do just as much damage as none.
I certainly find that there's a lot of important news in the WikiLeaks exposures, which I've seen so far, mainly through the mainstream press. I haven't had time. I was flying when they were coming out, and I've had to see them refracted through the Guardian and the Herald Tribune and the Der Spiegel and so forth. I'm struck. It's very familiar to me to hear that the Pentagon doesn't find that there's any news in this. Of course there's not news to them. It's their own reporting. And there wasn't any news in the Pentagon Papers for the Pentagon. I mean, they originated in the Pentagon. And the second point, their news judgment about what constitutes news seems to be contradicted by the judgment of Le Monde and the Guardian and Der Spiegel, and even papers that didn't have prior advanced knowledge of this, like, as I take it, the Telegraph, which seems to have found pages worth of news in it. The third thing, though, that very specifically that I find is this. I find for the last 9 years, American people have been protected or sequestered from the context of what is happening to the Iraqi people, and specifically how many civilians are being killed, even the range of estimates, which range from Lancets, which could be extrapolated to like 1.5 million, but then we're about 600,000, 10 times more than the Iraq body count. The American public hasn't heard either of those, the British-based Iraq body count, which has gotten up to 104,000 now. Now, interestingly, I've, in following that controversy myself from the internet, I'm addicted to the internet. I find it indispensable, partly because of the range of mainstream press that I find on it in a place like antiwar.com. Far better, or commondreams.org, something far better than I can get from any one paper like the Times or the Washington Post, even though I regard them as indispensable too. But it does give me a range of what's being said, even to some extent through the English-speaking world. But on this civilian point, I've learned an awful lot more from the internet than you would ever get in blogs and various people who follow this, than the Times has ever reported. So taking today's disputes right now, I noticed that the Iraq body count had gotten up to 104,000 by looking at news reports, 2 or more news reports. Now, I found that methodology quite questionable myself, to restrict yourself to civilian deaths that were in news reports. Obviously, there would be a lot that wouldn't be covered by that. But interestingly, meanwhile, the American people were being told, were repeating through the media, were repeating statements by the Pentagon, which I was sure were false, which were, we don't do body counts, we don't know. And when Barack Obama said for the Afghan reports, he said, I don't see anything here, or we don't, I think his spokesman said, we don't see anything that hasn't already been a matter of public discussion. Well, that's true up to a point. Here was the public discussion. News reports would say, if they said anything at all, would say, Iraqi civilians are claiming there were civilians killed in this airstrike. On the other hand, for balance, the Pentagon is saying that is untrue, or we don't have any evidence that this was the case, or we are investigating. That's the discussion. What their own reports now reveal to us, and he talked about lies here, is that all 3 of those were untrue. They were counting. They were ordering no investigation in many cases, in particular on the torture case. And the idea that we don't know was also true. They were counting. So what do we find from these? The reports report something like 66,000, I think,
yes.
civilian deaths,
yes.
less than the Iraq body count. But among those 66,000 are 15,000 the Iraq body count didn't have. Those are civilian deaths that were not in any news report, or they would have been in the Iraq body count. Yeah. Now, it made the Pentagon's point of view be not news that there were 5 9/11s worth of civilian deaths that hadn't been reported, 15,000. Or another way to put it would be 30 My Lai massacres, 500 each, because they're only Iraqis. Presumably, if they'd been Americans that hadn't been counted, we would regard that as news. But the rest of the world does regard it as news, and I would say it's crucial context for judging the policy that's going on. And let me take,
went on.
Let me take issue with that on that point very strongly. I heard you say it earlier, and I didn't interrupt. It's just unlike me in a way. Let me make the point now. I take very strong exception it's a matter of judgment, prediction, as to whether the Iraq War and the U.S. involvement in the Iraq War is over. In my own opinion, and I've been saying this for several years, in fact, during the campaign, I was predicting that either Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, if you read closely their fine print, not so fine, was if you read closely their statements, neither of them was promising a total withdrawal from Iraq, ever, but rather a reduction to what I predicted would be a manning of the bases of about 30, 40, or 50,000 troops. So going down to the 50,000 is what I expected. I personally expected not to go much below that. To do that, you would have to get rid of those bases, or man them entirely by mercenaries, or give them to the Iraqis. I do not believe that is going to happen. I don't say it's impossible. I used to say it was impossible to some degree. As I look at Maliki now and the others, it's just possible that the inner politics of Sadr and the others will actually insist on getting those bases out. But I think that's very unlikely, meaning that I think we will have bases there indefinitely from their perspective. And by that I don't mean 10 years, I mean 50 years, or until the oil runs out, essentially, which would be 100 years or more. And I believe that Americans will be killing and dying from those bases as long as they are there. And that's essentially indefinitely. So I don't think this war is on the way to ending for American involvement at all. I may be wrong. But meanwhile, what does that mean? Who are the people who are going to be killed? Who are the people who are being targeted by these extremely accurate strikes? Who is giving the intelligence for it? We see that pretty well in these strikes, in these reports. So I would like to see the American people, from these truths, which isn't the last word. For example, the reports that come out continue to, that you released, I noticed, I particularly looked at what they said about Haditha, because as a former Marine, I still feel my Marine roots in shame at some things that Marines are reported as doing. Or pride, when a guy like General Zinni, a Marine, warns against the Iraq War from the beginning. Or the former Commandant of the Marine Corps is now revealed by Woodward to have advised strongly against this escalation. Okay, I like that it's a Marine. And when Marines killed some 15 women and children in Haditha, and that was covered up by the entire Marine chain of command, I'm extremely dismayed by that. And I feel ashamed of it, and I hate it. And I notice it was total cover-up by the Marine Corps, a shameful episode. I notice that in those reports, they don't correct the fact that Haditha is still reported as 15 insurgents killed. There were women and children entirely, and 1 or 2 old men. So that's not the last word either. That's context, I think, that we didn't get from these particular reports, but we do get it in a lot of other cases in this.
Thank you. Let me go back to your point then. You haven't released everything. Is an imperfect or a fragment of the puzzle not a dangerous thing to provide?
We're talking about 400,000 documents, the most detailed compendium of information about a war to have ever been released. I would not say the description of this material as a fragment of the puzzle is accurate. It probably covers 50% of all military operations that occurred in Iraq between 2004 and the end of 2009. It doesn't cover US Special Forces, it doesn't cover the CIA, it doesn't cover top secret operations, it doesn't cover the actions of the British government, it doesn't cover the actions of the Iraqis, except where they overlap with operations conducted by the US Army. And they do overlap. So for these second groups, we can see glimpses of their behavior. We can see glimpses of CIA activity, over 194 reports mentioning the acronym OGA, a typical euphemism for the CIA, other government agency, sometimes used for the Defense Intelligence Agency. We can see reports about the behavior of the British, where they have overlapped with the US Army. And that behavior, interestingly, although the overlap is not large and is infrequent, is more accurately reported on because the US Army is not reporting about itself. It's reporting about another group. And where the US Army reports on an even more distant group, the Iraqi Army, or the Iraqi police, the reportage seems to be even more accurate. And of course, when it's reporting on its enemy, well, we're not sure whether it's accurate or not, but certainly every wart that they can see is on the page.
Yes, question from the back, the gentleman in the dark blue jacket.
Thank you. Julian, David, lawyer, freelance. Just wanted to ask you, you talked earlier about the leaks being relevant to the truth. And I just wondered, 2 things. How long have you been holding on to the truth? And why was it this week in particular, perhaps I think it was this Wednesday, when you decided, and what was to release the truth?
As a matter of policy, we don't reveal when we receive something, because that may give away information that could be used to track down a source. That said, we have been working on this for some months, and the various Guardian Spiegel, New York Times also had this for some months. you sort of raise a sort of interesting question about who got this material when, and why did we do it differently this time compared to last time. Last time we had us and our 3 print partners, Guardian, Spiegel, New York Times, and no one else involved in the equation. And that allowed something very interesting, which was to compare the coverage by these 3 prestigious organizations of exactly the same material. They started off at exactly the same point, but they ended up in different places. For example, the front cover of Der Spiegel was the Task Force 373 story, the US assassination squad, one of the US assassination squads in Afghanistan, which had been working its way down through a hit list I discovered in that material. A list of names. The Afghanis are unhappy about that situation because how do you get onto that hit list? Well, someone nominates you. Is there any judicial review process? No. Who can nominate you? Well, anyone connected to the US administration. That can include governors in Iraq who are having some political problem with you or some family problem and so on. So when that material came out, we could see that the Task Force 373 story, which was the front cover of Der Spiegel and which was mentioned in a big story in The Guardian also, was completely absent from the New York Times. And in fact, I know that Eric Schmidt, the sort of principal reporter who had worked on the Afghan material for the Times, had in fact written the story, and it was spiked. Now, I asked Bill Keller what is going on? Why was that story spiked? And he gave a reason, which was, well, they had done something a little bit on this beforehand and they wanted to do a little bit of this on this later, so they had ripped it out. But it had been written and it was the front cover of Der Spiegel. So there is a difference. You can also see that the Times went in for the looking at the Pakistan angle, which was actually a genuine and important angle to look at. But that was their lead, whereas The Guardian focused more on civilian casualties. And I guess Der Spiegel, in looking at 373, was focusing a little bit on the sort of absence of the rule of law. Same material, 3 organizations, similar resources dedicated to it, and different conclusions. So for Iraq, we wanted to do this with a different medium as well. And I thought it needed the emotional impact that TV can have. There were 14 pages in The Guardian on our Afghan story. That's a lot of pages, but how many people actually read 14 pages? I didn't read the 14 pages in The Guardian even when they came out. I read 2 or 3 and looked at the big map and said, wow, that's pretty cool. Everyone must think this is a very serious issue because The Guardian spent 14 pages on it. But people will sit through an hour-long TV special, whereas they won't sit through reading through 14 pages. So we got Al Jazeera and SVT, Swedish Television, and Channel 4 and so on to produce 2 independent TV specials. We'll be able to see the differences between them. The Al Jazeera one has already aired. The Channel 4 one, unfortunately, is airing right now. Channel 4 were not happy about giving a broadcast license here, by the way, because they didn't want to be seen to be too close to us, too close to their source in this matter. And the big heavy lifters, who were they in this? Well, across all the media organizations and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and us, well, to my mind, other than the production and the printing and layout, the big heavy lifter was Iraq Body Count. And they're the people who knew this sort of material, not these military reports, but who died where in Iraq the best. And they are a bona fide activist group and make no apologies about it, but they were the best resource, very easy to work with, and so on. So these broader coalitions, I think, is something that we'll try and do in future for all our big releases, not just the media, not just the mainstream media, not just the non-profit media in the case of Bureau of Investigative Journalism, but human rights groups who really know the ground extremely well and are very well motivated to try and plummet.
Yes, gentleman in the striped shirt here. Is there somebody I'm not seeing? Because I know sometimes somebody feels as if they're invisible. All right. Thank you.
All right. I want to ask you
Sorry,
a question about the future. You were talking about Iraq war. Before any war starts, there is obviously a war between agencies. If possibly there will be any military action against Iran, are you, collecting any documents at the moment? Do you have any documents related to that? If there is any, because if, or, I don't know.
Well,
But there is actually a war between agencies, not outside of Iraq, in other countries, if there is any possibilities of war between West and Iran, let's say.
well, in this Iraq material, there's a lot of information about Iran. The Iranian influence in Iraq and their support of the Shia and the various Shia factions is extensively documented through US military eyes and through their informers who, yes, they sell things for cash and they lie, but they can't all be lies. And the Iranian manufacturing stamps on shells and so on that are found around the place can't be lies. I saw an interesting report earlier today saying that from Israeli papers saying somehow that this material would diffuse the chance of a nuclear war with Iran. I don't quite understand how that's true. But Daniel has a special interest in trying to, over the past few years, encourage people in the US military and the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to bring out information that might stop a war with Iran. And remember, there was very serious attempts to get up a war with Iran under Cheney. And that's no joke. There was lobbying all over the place to do that. And we released one document that may have actually had some effect on that. I think it's maybe a 5% chance, 2 to 5% chance. Most wars start with border skirmishes. And border skirmishes that then inflate and get out of hand. And the Gulf of Tonkin incident can actually probably be viewed as some kind of border skirmish that actually didn't happen. But that document was the rules that US military soldiers must follow, including the rules about when they are to run into Iran and Syria. And there are circumstances when they can go, were circumstances in 2005, 2006, where they could run into Iran if they were in hot pursuit of someone. So that's a very destabilizing situation. And we published that, cooperating with the New York Times. This was not our first. Many people have written that Afghanistan, our release of the Afghan War Diaries was our first media cooperation. No, we've been getting front pages, including of The Guardian, since 2007. It was our first cooperation with 3. But that document then caused the Iranian Foreign Ministry to come out and say, we will not accept the US military coming into Iran, and we will respond aggressively. And that then, in 2008, caused those rules to be changed, to remove that possibility, which might have started a war. But Daniel, what are your thoughts on this Iranian situation?
Cy Hirsch revealed in 2006 that Cheney had directed, or he was calling for plans to be prepared, and not just remote contingency plans, but operational plans to be kept up to date day by day and week by week for a large-scale attack on Iran, air attack, not ground attack, including the option of nuclear weapons. and he reported that the Joint Chiefs were very opposed to this. And in a later article, a few weeks later, he said that the Joint Chiefs had succeeded in getting that option removed as the first wave of an attack, kept in a reserve. Now, I've been very concerned about this, and as I didn't know you'd kept up with what I'd been saying about this over the years, but going back in Harper's article, in other words, I've been saying that in some ways, the public was being prepared for an attack on Iran by some of the same media, including the New York Times, actually, as had prepared the way for an attack on Iraq. And some of the same bylines actually were involved. And that is true to this day. Now, apparently, a number of reporters, not in the mainstream press on the whole, Philip Giraldi, former CIA station chief, who writes in The American Conservative and some blogs, like antiwar.com, has said that, in fact, Cheney was persisting in that pressure up until his last days in office, and that George Bush, who I don't usually give a whole lot of credit to for one thing or another, Giraldi said that Bush, in effect, in line with the Joint Chiefs, overruled Cheney on this point. Now, again, I think that would be a disaster, and what I've been calling on, as he said, was for people not to do what I did, not to wait until a war had started. If they had the kind of evidence you're talking about here, I think, if they had information that the public was being lied into a wrongful war or disastrous war, but to do what I wish I had done. By the way, I have to stop shouting here because without a microphone in my hand, I have this feeling that I have to project it. But if you can't hear me, I won't shout so much. If you can't hear me, wave your hands, please. That what they should do is what I wish I had done in '64, '65, when I had the documents about the Vietnam War in my safe at the Pentagon. And if I'd put them out then, before the escalation had started, I believe that I was one of 100 people who had the information who could have averted that war, actually. And it's very obvious that that was true in Iraq, that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who knew what the Downing Street memos here revealed belatedly after the war had started. There was almost no comment I found here in England or in America as to whether those memos should not have been revealed in 2002 when they were written, before the war. Who had access to them then? Who chose not to put them out then? Let them be a little accountable too, as well as Blair and as well as Bush and Cheney, for not informing the public at that time. And similarly, on Iraq, the same is true right now. By the way, one of the things that Hersh revealed as early as 2006 and ever since was that we had then special forces operating in Iran, picking targets and preparing for possible air attacks and stirring up various tribes, non-Shia tribes in Iran for a possible coordination with attacks for regime change. Hersh has said that a number of times since then. Now, Hersh is mainstream press in the sense of being in the New Yorker, and yet he's often complained to me how little his stories are picked up by the regular daily press on these matters. And so the idea that we're doing fine without WikiLeaks. We have enough sources, we have enough context, we really do it, and we don't need somebody coming in here not providing the wonderful analysis and the context that we do, is, to me, absurd. And I've already mentioned the civilian casualties. Maybe we can get into the torture issue, I hope. I would like somebody to raise that, which is revealed in these documents. And then just my own little personal feeling. I guess I'm living in a world of my own where I see this war extending indefinitely in Iraq with American bases and American Afghans. And yet the only people I see in the American press are in blogs, essentially. Tom Englehart's Tom Dispatches, Nick Terse, who writes about this. Almost nobody talks about either bases or air war. And if somebody here can tell me the story in which an American or other reporter has flown with American pilots in Iraq or Afghanistan, as happened every day in Vietnam, I would like to know that story. Or which one has done a story on the bases that are still being built up in Afghanistan, Iran? Again, Iraq, let me know. I'd like to have that reference. That's a context that has kept the rest of the country, as far as I can see, from my little perspective, in a dream world, in the belief that this war is going to be over for Americans at the end of next year. I don't think there's hardly any chance of that.
Now there's a lady at the back.
Hi, thanks. My name is Raghida. I'm from Al-Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper. My question is to you, just to go back on the objective of all these leaks, the Iraq war logs. What do you want? How do you want this to end? Do you want to see people prosecuted? What's the best scenario for you? And then if you can speak also a bit on your safety. You mentioned earlier, well, you spoke that you're living like running away from Australia, and you're living here for, I don't know, 6 months or something. Can you just tell us a bit how you're living at the moment? Thank you.
We use the magic number 6 months, which leads me to understand that your source is that terrible New York Times article. So I'm not sure I need to comment any more on that. What we want out of these logs, well, what's the rationale for any organization? You know, I am struck that when we say, as an organization, that we are committed to a particular goal, namely justice, and a particular method, namely truth, that some organizations have disparaged this, and in particular, the Murdoch press. What is the alternative? A particular goal, making money, a particular method, telling lies. I mean, it just, that someone can take these comparisons seriously, I find mind-boggling. So in that particular goal, justice, well, of course, truth is your first and most important tool, not just in a particular case, but over the long haul. And I spoke to Cy Hirsch about this, and speaking about his values as a journalist. Why does he do why does he do what he does? Is he biased? No. Well, Cy Hirsch wants to aid justice, and he has a particular method, which is his brand of journalism. And but does that mean if he feels that some side is on the right, that he will distort his articles and put lies into them in order to get what he believes is the good guys across the line? Well, Cy Hirsch says no, and the reason that the answer is no is because that would sacrifice his long-term ability to redress wrongs with a particular case. So for us, we have the same philosophy, that we must be careful to be very accurate, and as far as anyone has ever alleged, we've never been wrong about the validity of anything we've published, in order to keep our long-term ability to promote those goals of justice. So the Iraq war logs, what hopes do we have for these? Well, I described them a bit earlier, in that we hope that that truth being there is a good, firm foundation to build everything else on, because in the end, that's all you've got. You just have either opinion and dreams circulating, or you have solid foundations, and solid foundations are something that you've seen yourself, or they are primary sources that are verified and accurate and so on. For particulative specific outcomes, well, if you're at our press conference, you'll see that Phil Shiner, a human rights lawyer here, prominent human rights lawyer here, has looks like he has some 40 wrongful death cases to take against the British government. Now, as I said before, the British government is only peripherally mentioned in this material. It is the writings of the US Army. There is a call by Nick Clegg, a statement by Nick Clegg, that there will be an investigation into the acts of torture committed in Iraq that were in some way either done by UK forces or tolerated by UK forces. But once again, only on the periphery. So this really should come from the people and institutions in the United States who are central to this whole endeavour. And remember that there are good people in the Pentagon. There are good people in the military. They're the people who give us this information. So I hope amongst the legal community in the United States that they will see this effort by China's group as an initial foray. I know Human Rights Watch out of New York has already yesterday published a press release saying that these allegations must be investigated. So hopefully these things step forward and there's some concrete outcomes, which which even if it's too late to address the harm that has befallen the Iraqi people and the harm that has befallen the United States and its allies being involved in that conflict, can act as an effective deterrent for similar behaviour.
There was a second part to that question. Let me just get back to it. It's sort of the elephant in the room tonight. There's been a lot written about you as an individual over the last few months. You have become the story almost despite yourself. And I think that I think we'd all like to hear what you have to say about that and the way it's helped or hindered the cause.
So you want me to become even more part of the story?
I do.
Well, it's always, you know, people say, well, don't you find all this attention on you annoying and very difficult? Well, yes, it's annoying. Yes, it is very difficult. Yes, it has been tremendously abused. But it is always a privilege to speak and have people listen. Always a privilege. So, insofar as that those attacks on me have given me more of an audience to speak, that's a positive outcome.
But are you afraid they're undermining your credibility somewhat, especially the reports of disaffected volunteers and so on?
That's nonsense. I mean, an organisation has employees sometimes, especially in very tense situations like ours, where there's lots of external forces trying to push people in particular directions. Employees can sometimes do bad things, and when they do, they are suspended by leadership. And that's what happened in our case. One person was suspended. After a month, they chose to resign instead of being re-employed. And they took one other person with them at that stage, I believe. But I have
talking about your German public relations or spokesperson.
But I have received we have received no resignations. So I think there was some extraordinary claim in the New York Times that a dozen people, core people, staffers had resigned. It's just a complete fabrication.
There's a slightly more substantial criticism coming from, among others, one of the Icelandic MPs with whom you worked closely, who say you seem to be taking on the Pentagon specifically and using a huge amount of resources to take the Pentagon on. It garners a lot of attention and maybe funding. But the fact is, the people who really need your services are people who live in dictatorships and the dark and obscured corners of the world.
Like Iraq.
Like Kyrgyzstan, like,
like Afghanistan. So we have a 4-year publishing history. Our philosophy and our choice in publishing in the beginning was, to some degree, to spread the philosophy of James Madison to the rest of the world, which is that for people who intend to govern themselves, they must have the knowledge that, they must have the power that knowledge will bring, because knowledge will always rule ignorance. And it's James Madison who was one of the principal framers of the US Bill of Rights, which includes the First Amendment. So actually, philosophically, this organization takes its heart from the American Revolution. And we set out to open the most closed societies and the most corrupt ones, because that's where we saw that we could do the most good. And we did that in quite a serious manner all over the world. But the world is completely connected. In busting Swiss bank, sorry, in busting Daniel Arap Moi, a man who ruled Kenya as first a hard and then a soft dictator for 18 years up until 2004, in exposing his approximately $3 billion worth of money laundering around the world. Well, was it about Kenya? Well, yes, a little bit. But where did the money go? Well, the money went into Swiss banks, the money went into London properties, the money went into London companies, the money went into a 10,000 hectare ranch in Australia, the money went into properties in New York, and in the process debased part of the Kenyan currency, making it more expensive for every Kenyan to buy things from petrol to rice, and making it cheaper for everyone in the UK and everyone in the US to buy things from Kenya. So, in fact, the whole world is connected economically when you're dealing with serious crimes or serious abuses. Now, we make a promise to our sources that we don't say, if you're a Kenyan, we'll publish your stuff. If you're from the United States, you can just end up in prison. No, we have a well thought out philosophy, which is we publish material that is of diplomatic, political, ethical or historical significance that has not been published before and is under active suppression attempt. Now, it turned out that this year, although we have published a lot of US military material over time, but this year we received over time a number of extraordinary compilations of hundreds of thousands of documents. Given that we're a small organization, what do we prioritize? Well, as an organization that is committed to the pursuit of justice, well, we have to publish first that material which is likely to have the most significant impact. And there's something else that I also realized fairly early on, which is if people see that we can be trusted to publish material that the Pentagon demands that we not publish, and demands in a very aggressive manner, then in fact we can be trusted to publish material that the government of East Timor demands to not be published.
Who's had their hand up longest? I'm trying to be fair. All right, yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mariam. This is a question for you, Julian. The Times released an article this morning by Richard Camp, which said that by releasing these documents, WikiLeaks have become propagandists for violent jihads worldwide. What's your response to that?
Well, you know, the phrase, the word propaganda tends to imply that the message being delivered is not true. If it's not true, it's because the Pentagon lied to itself internally. So who's the propagandist? We just deliver up the truth as fast as we possibly can, and we try and do analysis and coordination, but of course at its base is our principle of scientific journalism, which is publishing all the primary source material.
But don't you think that although you are looking to have a good impact on with these documents, it can also have a very bad ones and could maybe inspire extremists?
Daniel, what do you want to take that on?
You know, I was talking earlier about what is news here and what is not news, and the question is to whom. I was suggesting we haven't really gotten into the subject, for example, of some of the most inflammatory material in here, which has to do with lurid details of torture committed in part by Americans and a few Britons, and by the Allies, so-called, to whom we turn over suspects knowing that they will be tortured, and in many cases tortured in the presence of Americans. This is, I would say, not news to the perpetrators. I mentioned that earlier. But other people that it's not news to are the people who were tortured, or the survivors of the civilian casualties, and so forth. That's no news in Iraq. In fact, even the fact that this was covered up and not investigated can hardly be news to them. They know that no one is punished in the Iraqi army for this. The people to whom it is news, if they care, are the people who are now informed that not only has the past administration, for years, been violating its international obligations to investigate and prosecute all cases of torture by its own citizens or known to them, and to refrain from handing over any suspects who are likely to be tortured. That's an obligation of the United States which President Bush ignored, along with so many other treaty obligations. It turns out that our constitutional scholar and lawyer and teacher, Barack Obama, has been violating those international obligations just as egregiously as shown by these documents as his predecessor. Having said, I ended torture, that turns out to have as much substance as his statement, I closed Guantanamo, which he actually said in his State of the Union message. It rocked me back on my heels to hear that. The fact is that handing over people to be tortured and know it in our presence is torturing. That statement is just as good as President Bush's statement, we do not wiretap without a warrant, or President Nixon's statement, I am not a crook. In other words, it's worthless rhetoric. Now, I'm talking about a president for whom I voted, Barack Obama, and I expect to vote for him again against their foreseeable Republican opponent. I'm much too old to imagine that I will ever have the chance to vote for a politician who will not lie to us about what he's doing and what he's doing in the world and the crimes. But that's the choice we have. But I think this information now does give a challenge to Americans to see whether our Department of Justice and our President believes in the rule of law. And I'm talking not only about international law, but about domestic law. The practice has been not. Yeah, that's answered. But could that change? And now to take one issue, or at least distinguish my own position from what we've heard. I'm not interested in, personally, in justice in the sense of punishment or even prosecution per se. I'm not interested in whether really people are put in prison or tortured, let alone, for the crimes that they've committed. I want to see this stop. And one reason I want to see it stop is not only because there's a good reason for torture to be illegal and regarded as immoral by most of the world, but because it directly endangers the American troops that our Pentagon pretends to be so concerned about. Here we're hearing about their meticulous concern that WikiLeaks is endangering troops, though they have to admit, and I do give them credit for admitting this, for saying they have no evidence that anybody has been harmed, which I'm glad to hear. But they're so concerned about that and what this will do, when in fact these are the people who sent all those troops into harm's way. Why are they there to be risked right now in a war that's totally illegal in Iraq? So I think that's totally hypocritical on their side. But that aside, the real problem is I would like to see people held accountable in some fashion just so the process will stop and will change. That's what I want to see happen from these revelations.
If I can just follow up on that point very quickly, Julian, does it frustrate you that the area where there will probably be least redress, where there will be least justice for the torturers, will be inside Iraq? The Iraqi torturers are very unlikely ever to be brought to book.
No American has been brought to justice. Even not one American official has been even prosecuted for the torture which has been going on for 9 years. Why are we talking about Iraqis here? There has been absolutely no accountability for this in either administration. And as a matter of fact, I have some bad news for you. A latest bulletin in, actually, Julian. He's the good news person. I'm the bad news person. The latest word is, I've been giving all day in interviews credit to the British, and particularly to Nick Clegg, who frankly I know very little about, for having said that this, no matter how this information was achieved, the point is to act on it and to investigate it is our obligation. It's very grave, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been holding that up against Americans. I said, what American official has said such a thing so far in response to this that we need to investigate? The latest word is that Cameron has pushed that aside and now say, no, there's not going to be any investigation. That's what I was told anyway. So there's Anglo-American unity about this.
Your point's well taken about the American perpetrators, but I think we have to ask about the Iraqi perpetrators. After all, they're pretty exposed in the documents.
Well, there may be some justice. I mean, the political situation in Iraq is very fluid. There hasn't been a government formed for 7 months, so I know I would not. I would actually, given that fluidity, I would not be willing to take the pessimistic position that Daniel has, I think rightly, about the chance of torturers in the United States being brought to justice. To the people of Iraq, that fluidity means that they, in fact, can bring those people to justice, but bringing people to justice doesn't have to be a formal process. It can be as simple as people refusing to do business with you, refusing to sell you a house, refusing to allow your son to marry their daughter, etc. That is the traditional form of justice in most societies. The sort of mechanized, formalized justice system, which does have has its merits, is not the traditional justice that we have lived with for most of human civilization.
I think we have room for...
Can we just take a couple from the Twitter feed? We've got a lot of people asking questions.
Okay, we haven't got a lot of time, so the questions coming up should be quick, and we're going to have one or two from Twitter entries.
There's a few coming from Twitter. They're all for Julian, if I can just put them by you.
Outrageous,
There's one from Hack Daniels, who I think thinks we've been giving you a too easy ride in terms of questions. So he's asked that we ask about Bradley Manning and his treatment and why his lawyer has received no funds.
What's the question?
Alex Norcliffe wants to know about the servers in the US. Why are they there since Friday? And there's a question about the Johns Hopkins University Iraqi death study, which... And
maybe should we just take the first two? So the first question was about Bradley Manning. Why has Bradley Manning not received any financial support from WikiLeaks? Is that correct? Yeah. And the second one?
Servers in the US since Friday.
Why are the servers in the US down? Does that make sense to you?
They have been in the US since Friday, someone said.
Since Friday. All right. Did you get that?
Is that to him or to me?
That's both to Julian.
No, I didn't quite get the end.
Why are the servers in the U.S. down? WikiLeaks servers? All right. Over to you.
Well, we have a bunch of servers up around the world. We put on extra servers for this release, obviously, and they were working this morning, as far as I can tell, out of the UK. For the US, I don't know. We have to look into that. For Bradley Manning, our alleged source, we are in a very difficult position as an organisation that has someone that is accused of being their source. That has never happened to us before. There's no allegation that through any action or inaction he was accused of being our source. Rather, the accusation is that he spoke to a US journalist and former computer hacker who worked with the US Army, CID and FBI to betray him, and possibly Wired magazine as well. But I think we are in the moral position where someone who is somehow related to our publishing activities, we don't keep records of who our sources are, because it's very difficult with modern communication spying to keep anything secret over the long term. Extremely difficult when dealing with organizations that do not follow the rule of law, like the National Security Agency. So instead, our sort of modus operandi is to, when we receive material, to never know who it's come from precisely. So, I mean, I had never heard the name Bradley Manning before I saw media reports about this. But given that this is a man who has been who's now wrapped up in our publishing operations, whether he was a source or not, whether he was peripherally involved or directly involved, he is now in a position where he is in a prison cell awaiting trial. So I think we do have the moral burden to do what we can to defend him, but we also have the burden to not do so much that it looks like we are announcing that we have some inside knowledge that he is our source.
So what can you do? What does that amount to?
Well, we have campaigned for him in various ways, and as for the funding situation, there is no change for the earlier statements that we have made, but it is our advice that we should not make any public statement as to whether, for example, we are financially supporting his lawyer or not financially supporting.
Well, I have been in a number of rallies for supporting Bradley Manning, who is accused, and of course needs good civilian defense for what he's accused of, which is including the Apache helicopter, which certainly, that collateral murder case, which certainly he's accused of that, and certainly deserved to be out. And if, as you put it, the Pentagon is for once telling the truth on this, then then Manning is, I think, very much to be admired by me anyway, and thanked. And at these fundraisers and rallies, I was glad to see that people were quite generous in putting it out. Michael Moore, among others, by the way, made a rather large contribution. BradleyManning.org, I think, is where you can all make contributions. In answer to the question, by the way, maybe to make you feel better, or make Bradley feel, the New York Times did not, neither contributed a dime to my defense, nor ever printed the name of our defense committee, or the address of it or anything, nor ever asked anybody to contribute privately in a phone call or anything, whatever. And I happened to mention this, having finally, for the first time in 40 years, seen some New York Times executives about a month ago. And I told myself I wouldn't bring this up, but I found I couldn't refrain from mentioning it. And somewhat to my surprise, they all very quickly said, "Oh, quite so, rightly, right-o." And so, no, absolutely, we wouldn't do anything like that for a source. And I was a little disconcerted. I thought I was bringing to their attention. But no, of course, they said they never reveal a source, which is why for 30 years, it's been 40 now, for 30 years, whenever my name came up, I was described in the Times as Daniel Ellsberg, the man who says he gave the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times, leading friends of mine to say, what are they saying here exactly? And they would tell me, well, we never reveal a source when I mentioned this to a managing editor. I said, but I'm being prosecuted. I reveal myself, sort of. But their tradition was that they don't reveal a source even when someone is prosecuted. Since it was a deep tradition, I was the first person ever prosecuted, and actually the only one who ever has been. The Times has never had anyone prosecuted. But Bradley Manning is certainly, I would say, anyone who is your source, whoever it is, and God knows I don't know. Maybe you don't know. Whoever it is had to know they were risking sitting where Bradley Manning is sitting right now, in jail. And the same person to whom he apparently unburdened himself to some extent and led to his being in prison, also reports that Manning said to him, "I'm prepared to go to prison for life or even be executed to get this out." And he said, this is information that should be shared with the American public. They need it, and I'm prepared. And I recognize somebody, for the first time in 40 years, I'd heard actually say anything like that, meaning that they were in the same state of mind I was in 40 years ago. And I think that's very appropriate in this war, which I have to say, you know, in Faulkner's words for his Nobel speech, you know, he said, the past is not dead, it's not even past. And in this case, I think this war in Iraq is not past, and certainly the war in Afghanistan is not past. So for someone to be willing to sacrifice his own freedom, even for life, and Bradley Manning may do that, actually, the charges against him, is a perfectly reasonable, appropriate decision for someone to make, even for the smallest chance that will actually shorten this war. So I admire him for it because it is so unusual, and I wish it were less so. So he's a hero of mine. But the fact is, I think the better way is to say simply, he's doing what he should have done and what others should have done. How many other people, besides this corporal, as we used to call him, specialist, had access to those 400,000 cables, or he's not accused of those yet, or of the 90,000 earlier, or the Apache? How many, if a corporal had access to that, how many hundreds or thousands could and should have considered putting that information out? And I think they need to look into themselves and do better with their lives.
I think we have time for two more very quick questions. If I call on you, will you promise to make it quick? The gentleman over here with the blue shirt and dark blue jacket, and then gentleman at the back in the gray jumper.
I'm a reporter for the Daily Telegraph. I'm in personal capacity. I just want to know what the question about the servers. The submissions to WikiLeaks has been down for a long time. I wonder how concerned you are about the future sustainability of WikiLeaks, and what you and other individuals in the organisation are doing to make sure that you don't go down, you don't lose funding, and that kind of thing.
The last 3 months has been the most difficult 3 months that this organisation has ever had. But despite that, you can see that we did manage to get this material out. We got it out at the time that we had planned to reveal it. And although it's too early to say yet that it's the best job that we could have done, I think it's a pretty good job. The sort of attacks on us and the difficult situation we're in will presumably continue. The Pentagon made 3 extraordinary public demands in a press conference by Pentagon spokesperson Jeff Morrell. Number 1, that we destroy, return was the word that they used, return the Afghan war diaries and similar material. Number 2, that we return any material that we had for upcoming publication, and that includes the Iraq war logs. And number 3, that we not solicit similar material from the United States government in the future. That phrase, that unusual word, return, which seems extraordinary to use for any digital content, because of course you can just make a copy, and we've joked internally about should we just email 400,000 records back to the Pentagon and say there it is, it's done. Actually mirrors similar language that is used in the Official Secrets Act of the United Kingdom. So you'll see on the front of UK government documents, it is an offence to destroy or retain this document. And when we have received the UK Official Secrets Act's documents and seen this on the front of them, you cannot retain or destroy this document that only leaves one option, right? Which is to publish it. But the language used in that Pentagon demand comes out of the US Espionage Act. And those three statements and earlier statements about the content of, the alleged content of the material is in fact a trigger to prosecute us under the US Espionage Act. Just yesterday, the former CIA General Counsel made a public statement saying that it was his belief that, in fact, such a prosecution would be legal. James Madison might disagree, but that was that counsel's opinion, and we know of many sort of investigative and other legal review attempts to, in fact, get up that espionage prosecution. And in the publishing of this material, we have said and demonstrated clearly that we will not be threatened in that manner, and we will stick to our promises to the public and to our sources of publishing material that is given to us of the nature that I described earlier in a responsible manner. So we can expect over the next few months those difficulties that come out of those threats by the Pentagon to continue to manifest. For our submission system, we have, we make these promises about publishing everything that we receive, provided it fits our editorial criteria. But we have so much material that we have accumulated as we have grown as an organization that we no longer feel that, given the demands upon us, that we can, in fact, hold to that promise in a timely manner. But we are re-engineering those systems so the sort of internal publishing pipeline can be sped up, and as we acquire more financial and other resources and sort of have better engineering to deal with this incredible growth and incredible threats that we are under, then we will re-enable the submission system to receive more material. I think it is not right to be receiving documents that people may wish to get out urgently if you're not in a position to publish them within a reasonable period of time.
Any idea when they'll be back up?
On the financial threats, those are serious. So our credit card processing, all our money since January, all our money before January essentially came from me. All our money subsequent to January, as our costs were increasing and my bank reserves were decreasing, started to come from the general public. Our largest donation was 20,000 euros. Everything else, all the other money we've raised since then, approximately $1 million, has come in from journalists, from mums and dads and so on. And it has primarily come through online credit cards. And our credit card processor, 1 week after the release of the Afghan war diaries, said, "We're not having you as a customer anymore. Accounts are closed, arbitrary decision." And we received a forwarded copy of the email that was sent to our account handler as to why. Well, because we were placed onto a financial watch list in the United States and an Australian government blacklist. And the credit card processor, money bookers, then referred to see the ongoing controversy about the Afghan war diaries. So there are not just attempts to attack us in the press, not just attempts to attack us through trying to get up an espionage prosecution, which is even a real thing here in the United Kingdom, where the FBI raided Bradley Manning's mother, who lives in Wales. The FBI was here, knocking on the door in Wales, raiding Bradley Manning's mother. So those attacks are not just on the things that you might first think of, rather they go to even our financial infrastructure.
How can people contribute now, since that one is such as me? I gave my first contribution after the helicopter.
Well, The foundation in Germany that we work with, the Val Holland Foundation, which is a tax-deductible charity in Germany, it still receives international bank transfers and PayPal, and we have set up a new credit card processing system based out of Iceland.
Give the website. Unlike the New York Times, maybe some journalists here could actually reproduce that.
Yeah. Well, go to wikileaks.org, and there will be support or something on the left, and support us. I think there might be help defend this material, because you need to. It's not just our ability to get out future material. We need your help to keep this material in the historic record, where everyone can benefit from it.
Our final question this evening. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I have a question for Mr. Assange. I'm a freelance from Italy. The Italian war correspondent Julian Assange, and former member of the US military, alleged that the US used chemical weapons, especially during the Second Battle of Fallujah, and was used, allegedly, napalm and white phosphorus. Now, I underscore that Juliana's Grena episode, she was victim of a shootout by the US military, and there are also some inconsistency in the report you published, which is actually the report that the American military has written. Now, the question is, did you find any evidence, any trace of the use of chemical weapons by the US military or by the insurgents?
We haven't looked into that. Sorry, I haven't personally looked into that. The number of reports for Fallujah is low. It's interesting if you look at Fallujah 1, which we republished a very interesting internal report on a year and a half ago. Fallujah 1 was not a planned operation. Rather, four US military contractors were killed in Fallujah, and then there was an immediate response. And that lack of planning may also have resulted in a lack of reporting, or some of those reports may have been viewed as so contentious that they were classified secret. But there does seem to be some missing information about Fallujah. In 2004, there's also 2 months in their entirety that are missing from our material.
Well, if you've seen films on Fallujah, you've seen white phosphorus. How many people here have actually recognized on film or in practice white phosphorus? How many people here? Really? No, I only see one hand. In the Marines, I saw a lot of it. In Vietnam, I saw a lot of it. If you see white phosphorus, if white phosphorus is used, then you know what it is. You cannot mistake it. It doesn't look like anything else. It makes a brilliant white light tipped with beautiful scarlet tips that if any of this touches skin, burns through to the bone and continues to burn, cannot be put out with water. Terrible stuff. If you've seen white phosphorus burns, they don't look like napalm or anything else, and I've seen that. It's a weapon that certainly should be banned, and in theory is used only for smoke, which is a lie, or for illumination, which is a lie. Actually, Marines in Fallujah reported in a number of cases shake and bake, which means you first send some high explosive over to create rubble, and then white phosphorus to burn anybody in the vicinity. So it's used quite a bit. Just as when I watched Israel attacking Beirut years ago, I was watching on television, live television, very unusual, because in the Second World War you didn't have live television coverage of bombing of a city. And so here you're watching live television, and Israel was announcing, oh no, we don't use white phosphorus. And I was watching white phosphorus on apartment buildings. And again, I say it's absolutely unmistakable. So you don't have to search far for evidence for that.
I'd like to ask, go ahead.
I actually wrote some articles about the chemical weapons aspect. So when you hear these reports, when you hear these sort of denials from the Pentagon about white phosphorus chemical weapons usage, they are looking at a specific part of the Chemical Weapons Convention which prevents the chemical nature of white phosphorus being used. So that is the acidic, corrosive nature of white phosphorus. But the incendiary aspect of it is not, the US argues, forbidden by the Chemical Weapons Convention. So that is there's actually two different things that are being spoken about. So you might hear one question from this angle, but the denial is actually denying something over here.
I was very clear in the Marines and in Vietnam, where I was a civilian, but I used my Marine training to be with troops. I was very clear that I did not want to be defended by the use of white phosphorus against humans, even if they were shooting at me. And I was not alone in that belief.
Before we close, I'd like to ask one more question, Julian. It's about you. Where are you going to live if the doors seem to be closing behind you? How worried are you that you won't be able to find a place where you can live legally and continue to direct WikiLeaks?
Well, there's many places in the world to live, but you know, I don't want to turn into who wrote this book, Inside the Company? Philip Agee. Agee. I don't want to turn into a Philip Agee, and I don't think I'm forced into that position, but I wouldn't like to be forced into that position. I mean, I'm sure I could go and live in Moscow or Cuba or something like this, but I mean, what the hell are we saying in the West if journalists are forced to take refuge in Cuba or Moscow? I mean, is that how bad things have become?
Pick Cuba.
Pick Cuba is Daniel Ellsberg's advice. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you both very much. Thank you, Julian, in spite of your cold, for being so eloquent this evening.